Hi, this is 𝗵𝗵𝗽𝘁𝗲𝗿𝘀, the founder of the virtual EMDR eye movement therapy program. In this video, we're going to talk about how often you can do an EMDR therapy session, and more specifically, how often you can do self-guided EMDR sessions like those provided by virtual EMDR. If you've ever wondered how frequently you should be doing EMDR, or how often you should be doing EMDR therapy sessions for your exact problem or issue, then this video is for you. So over the years since I founded virtual EMDR, I've received hundreds of emails and social media posts from our clients. Some people contact me with suggestions about how to make virtual EMDR even better, while others ask about best practices, shortcuts, or even tips for EMDR. And a question that I seem to get all the time is, how often can I do an EMDR eye movement therapy session on myself? Once or twice a week, maybe 3 times or more, or even daily? Well, it really depends, and I'll explain exactly why. Before I break down how often you can do EMDR sessions, I want to spend just 15 seconds explaining what EMDR therapy is for anyone who may be new here. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a type of therapy that's been used by millions of people all over the world to treat PTSD and trauma, or anxiety and depression, addictions, and even things like fear, phobias, or grief and loss. It's an incredibly effective and fast-acting therapy that is normally done in a therapist's office, with the client being guided directly through the process. And as I mentioned before, I'm the founder of the virtual EMDR eye movement therapy program, which is an online version of EMDR that you can use at home anytime you need it without needing a therapist to assist you. Over the last 10 years, virtual EMDR has worked with thousands of clients, and I'm proud to say we've grown to become the world's largest EMDR session provider. So here's the short answer. How often you do an EMDR session depends on what kind of EMDR you're doing, meaning therapist-led or self-guided, and it also depends on what kind of problem or issue you're working through. I'll explain each of these points to you. First of all, if you're doing EMDR with a therapist, you'll need to do sessions when they can fit you into their schedule, and also as often as you can afford them. EMDR therapists charge at least $100 per hour, and it is often $200 per hour or even $250 per hour. And they don't often get to the actual EMDR part of the session for the first 2 or 3 or even 4 appointments. Because of this, people who are doing EMDR with a therapist tend to only have 1 session per week, maybe 2 if they have enough money given the high cost. On the other hand, if you're doing self-guided EMDR, such as with the virtual EMDR therapy program, you can do sessions whenever you want, but again, it will depend on the nature of the problem or issue you're working on changing. Virtual EMDR costs about $50 for a full month of unlimited sessions, so price isn't really an obstacle to the frequency of your therapy. One of the great things about using virtual EMDR versus EMDR with a therapist is that there's no pressure. If you're trying to do your EMDR session but you feel distracted or you can't seem to get focused, you can always just come back tomorrow without having to pay another $200 or having to wait another week for your appointment. Another huge difference between traditional therapist-led EMDR and self-guided EMDR therapy, which also determines session frequency, is the length of each individual EMDR session. When you see an EMDR therapist, each session is around 60 minutes or even sometimes 90 minutes long, but with self-guided EMDR or virtual EMDR, you can get a session done in as little as 20 minutes. In fact, our internal research on tens of thousands of virtual EMDR sessions indicates that most people do sessions that are about 25 or 30 minutes in length, compared to the typical 60-minute session with a therapist. The point of this video is not to try to sell you on virtual EMDR, but there are a lot of important and relevant points that have to be made about the differences between this self-guided program and doing EMDR with a therapist. Another factor in determining how often you do an EMDR session is the nature of the problem or issue you're working through. If you have PTSD or trauma from something horrible like being a victim of a violent crime or being in combat, then you may want to do EMDR less frequently, as your sessions can bring up some difficult and emotionally uncomfortable memories. With something this traumatic, you may only want to do 1 or 2 EMDR sessions per week until you feel better, because it's emotionally taxing to mentally revisit what happened to you. On the other hand, if you're working on something like your social anxiety about an upcoming event, your fear of driving a car, or giving a speech to an audience, you may want to do sessions more often. Many clients who use virtual EMDR for these types of issues will do short sessions 4 or even 5 times per week for a couple weeks until their symptoms diminish or disappear completely. We also have a lot of clients who successfully do EMDR sessions daily until their symptoms are completely resolved. This is especially effective for grief and loss issues and for anxiety about upcoming single incident events. Technically, you can do virtual EMDR as often as you want, but we don't recommend more than once per day. Additionally, we find that if you do virtual EMDR sessions too many days in a row, such as for 2 weeks straight, the effectiveness temporarily decreases, and you become sort of numb to the effects of the EMDR processing. This goes away if you give yourself a break for a few days or more. Also, you can use self-guided EMDR or virtual EMDR anytime your symptoms come up, so this may be a factor in deciding how often you want to do a session. Maybe you're feeling angry, triggered, or overwhelmed after an especially ugly argument with your spouse, a family member, or a coworker. You can do some EMDR sessions right after the incident to regain a sense of ease, clarity, and perspective, and get some distance from all those negative emotions. I always advise people to experiment with the virtual EMDR program and see what kind of session length and frequency gives them the most effective results. You aren't paying $200 for every session like you would with a therapist, so it's okay to take your time and see how to make self-guided EMDR work for you in the most effective way possible. I hope this video gave you some clarity about how often you can do EMDR therapy sessions. If you liked this content, please leave a comment or question for me and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.